What's up? Episode 42.
What's up, chipbags? Welcome back. Another great episode. Another great time. We're super excited to have everybody listening, to have our guest on today. Thank you guys so much. We keep talking about it because this is just the part where it comes real. We see all the memories. So it's been 2 years running. It's pretty cool. Episode 42. We're almost halfway to 100. Episode 50 will be big. That'll be really cool when that comes. Just 8 episodes away. That'll be this year still. Yeah. So this year we'll hit episode 50. So that's some cool things looking forward to. And thank you guys, everybody, for being along for the ride. Thank you, Taylor's Tins, Jobtown, Crew First, Toxic Suppression. We couldn't be here doing any of this stuff without these guys. So real excited and thankful for them.
Sure. Don't forget, check out the merch on our website. Tumblers, sweatshirts, shirts.
Those are nice.
Name
it. Like we said in the last episode. So I don't know how long we're going to have it running. So at this point, I don't know what it's going to look like, but it'll probably still be running. We'll probably run it through the month of May. We have a little anniversary deal, so check that stuff out. Thank you guys so much for watching and for supporting all that anyway. So we'll get off our soapboxes. Let's bring in the man of the hour. All right, let's bring in Caleb. What's up?
What's going on?
Fantastic. How are you? Thanks for coming on. Awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
No problem. Why don't you go ahead and give a little introduction about yourself? Tell everybody about you.
So my name is Caleb Smith. I spent 8 years with a pretty busy suburban department here in East Tennessee. Worked my way from a part-time firefighter through full-time and then all the way up to a step-up officer. I spent most of my time on a hybrid company, a Quint. We ran 2-man engine companies at our outstations and 3 to 4-man at our main station. We ran about 5,000 calls a year with 3 stations, so we stayed pretty consistently busy. Through that process, I got the opportunity to go to some great training, meet some great people, and got involved with teaching through Bears of the Oath, and for a while taught with my own company, Black Flag Fire Training. Now I've left the fire service full-time. Currently not involved in any volunteering, though that may come in the future. We'll see. And I work now as a young adult pastor at my local church.
Awesome. See, it's a shame that you couldn't have that beard on the fireside, because that is impressive. That was the first thing I noticed when you said you had left. I was like, that explains his profile picture. I was like, he's got a hell of a beard.
My wife was very happy that I could now get rid of the mustache and grow the full beard.
That's awesome. Well, as you kind of touched on, and we're going to do things a little bit different. Usually we have our question be right at the end, but we knew that with your background, your history, and where you are now, that it'd be a good thing to touch on right away. So our last guest, Rob Ramirez, big fan of yours, and had a nice question for you that I think would be a great way to kick this episode off. So you aren't getting out of the asking a question. You'll just have to do that at the end. So, but we're swapping it up with Rob's first. So his question was the decision to leave the fire service a hard one, and how has your purpose changed?
It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. Now on the other side of things, I don't know that it would be so difficult to make something like that again, but the fire service was all I had ever known. It was what I wanted to do when I graduated high school, and I worked a couple of years on the ambulance and got into it fairly quickly, and spent my whole adult life doing that, and had poured myself into it. All of my friends that I had an opportunity, like Rob, a huge mentor of mine, somebody I look up to still to this day, not just as a firefighter or an instructor, but as a man. And so to walk away from that, to not be involved in there were a lot of things that were scary about it. On the other side of that decision, especially with my faith, it was the right decision. And guys like Rob, like Shane Bentley, Devin Craig, Chris Snow, Kevin Pfluger, I could keep naming people. I thought that I would lose those connections, but I haven't. And I had the opportunity to go down to the last Bears of the Oath, even though I wasn't in the fire service, and be involved. And I couldn't be more thankful for Shane for letting me do that to ease the burden a little bit. Yeah. As far as the purpose goes, in ways it has changed, and in ways it has not. I would say overall the purpose has not changed, but the method of the purpose has changed.
Yeah. That was kind of his follow-up on there was the serving of the community. And I know when he asked it, we kind of all, we was like, how has it changed from serving the community to, like, I guess, serving humanity? Because you're still serving, but like, how has that changed a little bit? Because you're serving maybe even some of the same people, but in definitely a different fashion.
I am. And, that was one of the things that through the process of leaving the fire service around the same time, I actually lost my dad, who was a very strong man of faith through his whole life. And that was a huge process of me coming back to the faith. But there are so many things that were parallel in my fire service experience and now my walk in faith and the service I do with the church. Jude 1:22 and 23 talks about having mercy on some who are doubting and saving others, snatching them out of the fire. And that was one of the things when I first came back to my faith that played a huge role, because we train hundreds, if not thousands of hours a year, those that love the job and are into the job for that 1% moment where you get to go in and you get to potentially make a grab and save a life. And the reality of it is, and this was a hard reality for me to face initially, every single person that has ever been pulled out of a fire, every single student that I've taught that may potentially pull somebody out, that person is going to die again eventually, and they're going to stand before God and have to answer for that. And so now I'm looking at a completely different type of fire and a completely different type of rescue.
Absolutely. Keeping on the faith track, where did you find your faith, and how has that led you into ministry?
My faith was something that I was raised in. My dad was a servant in the church my whole life, whether it was serving as a deacon or a Sunday school teacher. He went to seminary for a while, never graduated, but it was something he was pursuing. Everything he did, his faith played a role, whether it was his job or his family or serving actually inside of the church. And in that, when I became an adult, I had grown up in that. I had the knowledge and I had the experience in church, but it wasn't my faith. It was my parents' faith. And so I really walked away from it in my time in the fire service and lived a life that, while some people would call it a good life, it was not honoring to God. And so when I left the fire service, and really the challenges of leaving the fire service forced me to come back to my faith, because I needed to have something to ground me. And that, in my opinion, when you really get into the Christian faith, you have no option but to be a servant. Servant leadership is a hot topic in the fire service. It's an awesome topic. You've got programs like Smoke Diver and Flames that really epitomize in the fire service what it means to be a servant leader. But to be a disciple of Christ, being a servant leader is kind of something that has to occur through that faith walk and journey.
Absolutely. Going kind of still keeping along the same routes like we talked about with your stuff that you have to offer. What would be a piece of advice that you would give someone going into the firefighting career, revolving around like keeping faith?
Keeping faith if they already have it, or coming to the faith while they get in it?
Oh yeah, I would say absolutely both.
If you are already a believer, and I have met some incredible men of faith, both in my department. A guy named Michael Doherty was a huge influence on me, and outside of my department, people that are of the faith. It gives you something to hold on to. We do see some of the highs and lows of humanity, and that's another parallel to ministry. I joked that I left the fire service where I got to see people at their worst and their most desperate when they needed help, and I went into ministry where I get to see people when they're hurt and desperate and need the most help. But with that, we cope with things like dark humor, or guys turn to alcoholism. We've got some of the highest divorce and suicide rates ever. Your faith is what grounds you to be able to handle those things that you see. And so to be rooted in that, and it not just be, we talk about t-shirt firemen, not just be t-shirt Christianity, where this is what I do on Sundays and Wednesdays when I'm not at the fire hall. Because my faith, for me, when I was a fireman, my faith was the fire service. I didn't have faith in God. And that drove me through some pretty dark times in my own walk and in my marriage and in my family. To hold on to your faith and to grow in your faith and be intentional with your faith as a firefighter really does give you that ability to be grounded, to be able to handle the difficult things.
Awesome. And what would you kind of try and guide someone, let's say, like kind of like you said, how you didn't have the faith at the start? What would be kind of your piece of advice?
I think that all of us, there are people who say they don't believe in any God, but we have something in that position as God. And I love to have conversations about this with people. And I would love, if anybody wants to have a conversation that hears this, I will get them my information somehow.
Yeah.
But evaluate what you're putting your faith in, because you put your faith in people or in the job or in really anything other than Christ, it can be gone. And I know that we could have hours of conversation about Christianity versus other religions. Again, if somebody wants to have that conversation, I'm more than happy to. But I think at the end of the day, when you evaluate everything, the gospel of Christ is the only true way. And so I would point people towards that with everything in me. And it's, again, saving some out of the fire. To me, it's not just what church do you go to. It's not just what do you profess, or do you have a Bible in your house? It's what do you live? Because the walk of discipleship, like the walk of being, what you guys are doing right now in pursuing firemanship, it's a lifelong process.
Awesome. Going on, another thing that we know you are very good and passionate about, because especially Rob wanted to ask him and talked about this. We talked about it a little bit before we recorded. How did you balance your work and family life when you were on the fire side? Because if you want to touch on how big of a family you've got, if there's anybody that knows how to balance that, it's you.
Well, so for those that don't know, my wife and I were foster parents. We have adopted 10 children through that journey. They now range from 18 months old to 16, turning 17 this year. Balancing that is something that is incredibly difficult for anybody, whether you have one kid or you have 10 like I do, because regardless of how many kids you have, the fire service, especially when you want to do it well, it demands a lot of you. It demands time away at the fire hall, but also time away at conferences and training and classes to further better yourself. And those things are important. I think faith plays a grounding aspect in that for you and your spouse to be on the same page, but also being intentional when you are home. And I can look at this on the backside, looking at my past now. I didn't do a very good job of balancing it. I think that's something that we're all guilty of because we're passionate about the fire service. We love the job. We love the people. We love the classes and the training and the going to work. We can't lie to ourselves. That has to be important. You have to have open communication with your spouse where they can tell you, hey, I'm not okay. I need you to be home. And you have to accept that fact. Matt McGee just recently was on a podcast and spoke about that, where he had to be open with his wife. And I have nothing but the most amount of respect for that man. And when he said that, my respect for him only grew. But I think the foundation of it is not justifying your time away by telling yourself you have to do it. Because ultimately the community needs you and they need you to be a good fireman, but your wife, you committed yourself to, or your husband, you committed yourself to, and you owe them first.
Yeah. I think it's something you always hear at every station, every department, every conference is the family first. And like you said, I think it is easy to kind of just, oh yeah, well, I know when I'm home, it's going to be family first, but there's extra steps that you can take when you move away and when you're on all these things. Cause yeah, if you get into this job, that just means there's even more time away. We're gone enough as is. And man, the conferences, there's only so many local ones, and even the local ones, you're gone for a couple of days at a time. And so it's always a good time. So it's hard to necessarily say no, but exactly like kind of you said, you committed to someone, you owe your best to them as well.
Oh yeah. And it's not impossible. My wife is one of the most incredible women I've ever met. And even when I was not walking in my faith and I wasn't being a good husband, I wasn't being a good father, she was gracious enough to let me go and to do those things because she knew I was passionate about it. Ultimately, she suffered more than she needed to because I wasn't taking her into consideration, but it isn't something that's impossible to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that wraps up kind of the specific ones that we've got for you. Now Brennan's got our generic ones. So
this one you can take how you want. You can take it wherever you want. I love the rabbit holes. So the question is, why are we here?
The fire service exists to serve the community. That's been something that has been established from the beginning of firefighting, to protect property and to save lives. Why we're here could be a whole lot of different answers. In my opinion, we exist to glorify God. And, scripture says anything that you do it is for the Lord, not for men. in the fire service, we should have the highest standards for ourselves physically, mentally, tactically. Those things all need to be squared away. And if I'm taking it that seriously for strangers, how much more seriously would I take that if I'm not only doing it for the strangers, but I'm doing it because I'm being an example of a disciple of Christ?
Absolutely. Like that.
All right. Where did you discover your passion for training?
So my passion for training actually came from a failure. When I got into the fire service, I said I spent a couple years on the ambulance beforehand. And on the ambulance, I was in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's a very, very busy metropolitan department. You don't have stations. A lot of times you're eating gas station food or whatever you can get in an EMS room. And there was no physical fitness whatsoever. And so I entered the fire service. And in Tennessee, you only have to have 2 weeks of training to be a certified firefighter, be able to go interior, do searches. And in the 2-week academy, I mean, you guys know, and the people listening know how much there is to firefighting. And to cram that into 2 weeks, there's not time made for things like physical training. Had there been, I never would have graduated. I was 300 pounds when I went through the academy, and I went to my department, and I'm not at all trash talking my department because there's some amazing people that work there, and the culture has changed drastically. But there was a lot of the mentality that, that won't happen here. And I that was comfortable for me because I wasn't in shape and I wasn't training and I wasn't pursuing to be better. I think prior to the event that I experienced, there had been one entrapment with rescue in the entire history of the department. About 6 months after I got on, we got dispatched for a fire. It was April 12th at 5:44. It was a Sunday morning. We were coming off that morning. Get to the house. It's about a 900 to 1,000 square foot box. And I was met by the first due engineer at the door. He said they had victims and they needed help. And we ended up with 6 victims, 4 adults and 2 kids in that house. And the first one that I put hands on, because I wasn't physically fit, because I wasn't training and I didn't have that drive, I couldn't move them. I ended up getting help from some officers that were on scene, and it was awesome. And like you hear, I mean, this fire proved the data. They were all stacked. 4 of the 6 were stacked inside the back door trying to get out. And so the rescues were not what I would call now on this side of things difficult. But I was still incapable of that. And when I left that fire, I went through some time where I questioned whether the fire service was what I really wanted, whether I was even capable of doing it. And when I decided that it was actually through a class that was taught by one of our training officers. And he used a lot of the Fit to Fight Fire imagery. And there was one that said, it's not personal, it's professional. And at that point, I threw myself into getting physically in shape. In Tennessee, there is a smoke diver program. There's programs in Georgia, Florida, Indiana. They're starting one in Colorado, Oklahoma, all over the place. And they're all kind of in the similar vein. I'm not going to say they're all the same because they have different drills and goals. But prior to that fatal fire, I had told a guy in my department that wanted to go that was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. Why would anyone want to do that? And so I when I started losing weight and challenging myself physically, I decided that was going to kind of be my test, was Tennessee Smoke Diver. And with that, to prepare for those programs, you have to throw yourself not only into the physical preparation, but into the mental and the tactical preparation as well. And so that kind of all just came in line. And when I saw the results, not only in Smoke Diver, but on the fire ground, that just made me want to pursue it more.
Awesome. That was a great story when we were down in MAFC. I think just to lit the passion for that and got some good lessons for it. I know a lot of the guys that we talked to that had sat in on it and listened, they got some good stuff from it too. So like you said, everybody is, I think that culture has definitely changed in terms of most departments. I think that's talked about a lot, which is really nice to see, where you go to these conferences and it seems like it's the issues that all firefighters always bitch about are starting to get a little bit more like nitpicky and meticulous. And you're kind of like, oh, maybe this is getting better around here. Like it's not anymore of the, oh yeah, it's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen here. It seems like there's at least 3, 4, 5 guys on each of these departments, like across the country, that are into it and just starting to drive that passion up, which has been really cool to witness. Even though we're really young in this career, it's like you can still just see that it's starting everywhere you go. You find people, and it's pretty cool.
And you guys are getting in it at the perfect time, because it is kind of that up after so much decline in passion and in training. mean, there's training available all over the place now.
Yeah.
There's a conference near me in Gatlinburg. It's called Smoky Mountain Weekend. And it used to be the majority of it was state classes, which is awesome. I'm not knocking the state classes at all. But the truth of the matter is a lot of them were designed for that larger department with a 4-man engine company and, 5 or 6 trucks on scene. And it's difficult to apply that to a department where you've got 8 guys on scene in total.
Yeah.
But now here on the, 8.5 years later, they've got Nick Peppard coming in to teach. We taught there a couple years ago. The Citizens First Fire Training guys have been there and taught some classes. And just to see that conference expand outside of the IFSTA manual has been an awesome and exciting thing. And when I went through Smoke Diver with a guy in my department, we were the first 2 to go through it in, I want to say, about 15 to 20 years. Not that Smoke Diver makes you a good fireman or not a good fireman, but it's just part of that same vein of wanting more. And since then, I think we've had 8 guys go through, 6 of them successfully. So it's been an awesome change in the department, and just to see people get excited about the fire service and about training and the opportunities has been great.
Yeah, I think we're getting an upend of your culture, like you said.
Yeah.
Cool, man. What piece of advice were you given early on in your career that stuck with you?
So this is probably the best piece of advice I got my entire time in the fire service. After that fatal fire, I really threw myself into physical training and into search. Because what you learn in the fire academy is in most fire academies, very poor representation of how to search effectively and how to remove victims effectively. You guys were in the class in MAFC. We talked about a dummy is not going to teach you how to drag a person.
Yeah.
And I will never forget Rob Ramirez at the Bears of the Oath. I think it was the 4th Bears of the Oath conference, said that trying to move a victim through a house is like trying to move a 250-pound rotisserie chicken. And that is the most accurate representation of it I have ever heard, with the skin sloughing off and everything. But with that, I wanted everybody else around me to understand that we needed to change and we needed to do better. And a lot of the guys in my department at the time were kind of some old heads. And I came off very aggressively in my push to change the culture. And there was a guy that pulled me aside, Michael Doherty, who I've already referenced, mature, experienced, capable, skilled fireman. And he said, it's not 100% pressure. That'll make everybody walk away from you. It's 10% pressure 100% of the time.
Yeah.
The message you're sharing, whether it's you need to be fit, you need to train, or even in your faith, right? Coming on too strong, nobody's going to listen to you. You ruin your message, whether the message is good or not. It's that consistent pressure and really invitation to come join into this. We started out working out in the bay in our gear by ourselves. And by the end of it, guys were coming out and we were having workouts with 5 or 6 guys at a time. And it was awesome. But initially, a lot of people were put off to the message that we were trying to share and to get across because of the way that we brought it.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about that a lot on here, that 10%, 100% of the time. And it's just, you get much more buy-in, it's because that's how you do it. But at some point, talk isn't going to be it. So you got to start walking the walk. And if it starts with one, it starts with one. It's nice when you can start with maybe 2 or 3, because then that's, when 2 or 3 people are missing from the recliners and someone's like, hey, where are they? And I don't know, I saw them go down to the bay. And then all it takes is one of those people to be like, I wonder what they're doing, and go walk out and take a look. And, it starts building from there. But yeah, sometimes you got to start with one. And yeah, if you're 100%, people would just write that off as like, oh, that guy's just fucking, he's way too built full of it.
Understand your environment too. If you've got a 55-year-old engineer on your truck, he's not going to get out there on day one and do burpees with you. And he's not going to get out there and do some of these hardcore RIT and search drills. He might not be capable of it, but he has knowledge and skills that you need to learn. They're worth imparting because they're not just something you learn in a class. They're tested and proved. And so get them involved in other ways. Hey, would you come run the timer for us on a Tabata workout? Or, hey, would you come, just be our safety on this drill, make sure we don't get hurt. And you'll find that a lot of the time, if you do that, as you're training, they'll just start dropping little nuggets. hey, man, try doing this, see if that works better for you. And you might not implement all of it. You know, they might look at some stuff and be like, well, why would you do that? We've always done it this way. One of the most dangerous phrases in the fire service. But there will be things that you can pick up on because that experience won't be around forever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the whole, what brought this around is bringing in those old dogs that we say, or the old dogs to get the old tricks from.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
that's, yeah.
All right. Last kind of generic question we got. There's a lot of them, like you said earlier. What conferences do you think are the best for a new firefighter to attend?
I'm kind of biased, but I love MAFC. MAFC was one of the first big conferences that I went to. And I mean, even just the lectures, the fact that they offer those lectures completely free, there's so much value. You're getting people from large departments and people from some smaller suburban departments. And you can pick what lecture you want to go to. You know, they don't limit you. And they have topics that cover every spectrum of the fire service, both, you know, tactics, recovery, rehab, mental health. And that's one of the best conferences out there. And then anything by Bearers of the Oath. Shane Bentley, if you guys have not gotten a chance to interact with him very much, is one of the most selfless people in the fire service, period. A little story on him. When I first started going to training, my department was not familiar or comfortable with outside training. And they wouldn't let us take our city equipment. Couldn't take our gear, couldn't take an air pack. And so I had gone online and bought a set of gear off eBay, which is not a bad thing to do, but it was in pretty rough shape.
Yeah.
Firemen aren't making thousands of dollars. We can't just go, you know, buy a brand new set of gear. And I showed up to this class in Dalton, Georgia with Bears of the Oath, first Bears thing I'd been involved with. And not only did they invite all the students in, really as family, and get them involved and treat them as a peer and an equal. Towards the end of the day, we were doing live fire drills, and there was a small tear in the back of the bunker pants, and it got caught on a windowsill and tore wide open. And Shane pulled me aside and was like, hey, man, you know, this ain't going to cut it for live fire drills. And got me a set of gear. And I assumed it was a loaner set. And at the end of the day, he's like, no, man, this is yours now.
Oh.
You know, like that's just who he is. You know, if he has something, he's willing to give it. And that's not just gear, but his time, his investment into me as a fireman, as a husband, as a man. I cannot talk highly enough of him.
That's
I
awesome.
have to check that one out.
Yeah.
Check out Massey too. That was a great conference. I learned a lot, and it was a great atmosphere.
Yeah, we will definitely make it back there. It's like you said, there's so many to choose from right now. We're trying to spread out and get there, but we've got to
make them all.
Yeah, just as much of a list that we got of all the ones we want to go to. We're keeping a list of ones we have to go back to, and MAFC was one of them. That was Marietta, Georgia. That was where we stayed. Oh my God, that little city was beautiful. That was so much fun to walk around. Like I would have never known about that city. Like you tell me, oh, we're going on, you know, to vacation to Georgia. Never would have found that city. And like that's kind of what I love on this side too, is when you get to go to these conferences, you wind up in the most like crazy, beautiful, you would never have been to places. And it's like, this is sweet.
Oh yeah. And there's some of those individual classes too that are like that. You know, a lot of people know about Georgia Smoke Diver, and it's an incredible program. Just a little bit outside of Dalton, there's the city of Chatsworth, and there's the Georgia Flames program. And I know it's gotten kind of some more publicity here recently, but it's in that same vein of Smoke Diver. The guys that run that class are incredible. Down in South Georgia, there's a class called Georgia Spartan. It's a 24-hour straight class, kind of in that same similar vein.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those classes are completely free.
Oh.
Now, physically, there's a high cost there, but you know, there's no cost to attend the class as long as you can get yourself there. And I cannot recommend those programs enough. I graduated the Georgia Spartan program in 2020 or 21, I think. And I attempted the Georgia Flames program twice and medicaled out both times. But even in that was one of the best classes I ever took in the fire service.
Wow, that's cool.
Too.
Yeah, absolutely. So that wraps up the generic questions and all the other ones we have. Now the hard part. So it's all on you. So you have to come up with a question for our next guest, who will be the third time he's been on this podcast with us. This man, I think you've met him too down at, especially at MAFC. He was there doing the tactical resiliency training with us, and just a solid dude. I mean, when we thank all of our sponsors and say like that we couldn't do it, this man is what, like, he gave us basically his own personal donation to get started just from meeting him like once. And God, he has been such a mentor and such an awesome guy, Jeremy Sanders. So that is the guy you got to come up with a question for our next guest.
Man, he's such a good one. He supported us with Black Flag Fire Training and kind of the journey we went through with there. Man, I love him too.
Dude,
so many awesome dudes.
Awesome.
My question for him would be, when you get somebody on your crew, you know, his whole ethos of stay humble and work hard, and you know, his involvement with tactical resiliency, you get somebody that has never been pushed in their entire life. How do you bring them into that world without pushing them away from it?
I like that question.
Yeah. I love that. He should have a great answer for that.
Dude, I can't wait
can't wait to have him back on. It's been so cool to meet some people, and you know, he's been one of them that started from day one, before we even had an episode out, before we had any followers or anybody. He was there and got the ball rolling. So that's awesome.
Crazy.
And now look at us. I mean, he'll be episode 53 or 43. Too late for me. Might even be having a stroke. Who knows? Brennan's usually the one that counts all the numbers in the top, so that's like
yeah, I have to. I forget.
But no, it'll be sweet. So that wraps up the questions and everything that we have planned out for you. The last part that we call here is just the kitchen table. Anything that you want to touch on more, that you want to share, anybody or anything that you want to shout out. This is just where we bullshit, and whatever you got to share is all yours.
Yeah, you know, there's so many awesome things about the fire service. You guys talked about Jeremy supporting you from the very beginning. You guys know who Devin Craig is with Train or Die?
Yes.
He was like that for me. He had never met me. We connected on social media. We talked, you know, had some great conversations. And when it came about time to pursue training with Black Flag and teaching some classes, he supported us from the get-go. You know, gave us so much advice and so many hours of phone calls. So I say that to say, you can find that everywhere in the fire service.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many, you know, Shane Bentley, Devin Craig, Jeremy, just guys that are willing to invest and pour in. And so if someone is wanting to train and they don't know where to start, like, start on Facebook, get connected with some of these people and watch the doors that will open. You know, guys like Rob Ramirez, who I heard him for the first time at Bears of the Oath when he gave that lecture, but he stayed around and talked with people and gave more advice. And I had a question for him regarding our air packs, I think it was, in RIT and some of the stuff that he had talked about. And he gave me his phone number and was like, well, you know, if you have any more questions, call me. Yeah. Well, this is a guy that's a giant in the fire service, and I'm nobody from nowhere. And he said, no, call me anytime. Basil Ibrahim was the same way. Matt McGee. If anybody is interested in any of the physical programs, go listen to anything from Matt McGee or Logan Broberg. You know, and the last thing I kind of want to touch on, I want to steer it back towards faith. This is something I've had some conversations about. You guys are, I assume, familiar with the fire triangle or the fire tetrahedron, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that seems super fireman 101 basic. But there was something that in my mind tied into my faith with that. So, you know, you've got your heat, your oxygen, your fuel source, and a chemical chain reaction. And when we look at our faith, and if you don't mind me asking, are you guys both Christians?
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at your faith, right, look at it in that same way. You've got your personal time with God. That's one of the arms. You've got your time in the Word. That's another one. You've got involvement with fellow believers, which I'm a huge believer that having that community, just like the fire service, where you pour into each other and you invest, you need to find that in your faith. And then the chemical chain reaction being the work of the Holy Spirit in your life. If you take any one of those away, your faith dies. The fire goes out. And we need to keep that fire burning in our training and passion. When I taught with Black Flag, we had our own little triangle for what it took to be a good fireman. And it was physical fitness, mental resiliency, and tactical proficiency. You take any one of those away, you're no longer a good fireman. Mm-hmm. You take any one of those away from your faith, and you're no longer a believer. You know, eventually you'll find that you've drifted farther and farther away from what it means to be a disciple of Christ. And you found yourself operating and living in a way that you never would have thought you would.
Wow, that's a great tie together on it. How many times have you used or heard kind of the joke that now you used to put out fires and now you light fires in people?
Man, I'm sure I teach a men's Bible study on Monday night, and I'm sure that if you ask, they are probably sick of hearing my fire service analogies, because that's all I've known. You know, that's the only I've never worked in anything else.
Yeah.
But there are so many parallels, you know, and I love it, and I'm thankful for it because it helps me grow.
Yeah.
It helps me pour into some of the guys that are in the fire service that I still communicate with and love dearly. But I'm thankful for it, even though they're probably sick of it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy family life and work life now to come on and share some of that faith and some of that knowledge. It's been an enjoyable time.
And
yeah, thanks for coming on. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
thank you. Time.
Yeah,
thank
you everybody for watching and listening. Episode 42. We're almost there, almost at 50. So keep it up. Thank you guys so much. Thank you again, Caleb, for coming on. And as always, don't be a shitbag.
Thanks for listening. Don't be a shitbag.